200 years ago, on February 11, 1821, French Egyptologist adventurer Auguste Mariette was born. Unfortunately, his legacy faded over the years, despite all his incredible achievements, on top of having been one of the greatest Egyptologists ever. In fact, he is the only person with the rare honor of being buried in the gardens of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, which is a big deal. In this episode, I will tell you all about an Egyptologist who braved the kind of adventures you see in Indiana Jones movies. Auguste Mariette was born in Boulogne-sur-Mer, a seaside in northern France. When he was a child, he enjoyed exploring the grounds of a medieval castle. According to the legend, there was a secret passage somewhere that led from the castle in Boulogne to the next city. Like any other child, he often dreamed of finding this passage. One day, when he was 14, he stumbled upon an entrance hidden behind a pile of fallen stones. Absolutely certain that he had finally found the secret passage, he brought his 7-year-old brother Charles along with him. Both of them crawled through the tunnel with only a candle to light their way. Then, of course, their worst fears came true. The candle suddenly went out, plunging Auguste and Charles into pitch-black darkness. Both budding explorers had a hard time finding their way out. Charles was completely traumatized by the experience, but Auguste thought it was a thrilling adventure and promised himself that it would not be his last. At 29, after he managed to convince 2 great Egyptologists to give him a chance, he was sent to Egypt on a mission to purchase ancient manuscripts. Auguste learned a bit of Arabic as well as how to shoot a rifle. Someone told him it would be a useful skill, and it turned out to be the case. But once he was in Egypt, he found his mission harder than expected. And since he was not a very passionate man, he decided to travel a bit with Bonnefoy, a Frenchman living in Cairo who would one day become his best friends and right-hand man. One day, when they were walking through the desert at Saqqara, they saw a stone head poking out from the sand. The pair was so excited, they started digging away at the sand around the statue and uncovered a sphinx that looked exactly like several sphinxes that Auguste had seen among collectors' and antique dealers' items. Suddenly, he had a bright idea. He remembered a very ancient text that mentioned the long avenue of sphinxes at Saqqara leading to the necropolis of sacred Apis bulls. Auguste Mariette was convinced that this sphinx was part of this avenue and that, with a little bit of luck, he would discover the necropolis that everyone has been trying to find for more than 100 years. Without a second thought, Auguste hired workmen and bought equipment with the money that the Louvre Museum had given him. Then he turned his attention to excavations, and that's when trouble began. At Saqqara, many other people were also looking for this necropolis. Other archaeologists and tomb raiders who worked for collectors. None of them were pleased with the competition from this newcomer. Auguste Mariette had many enemies, some of whom were quite powerful. When some of them paid his workers to not turn up for work, Auguste simply hired new ones. Other enemies paid suppliers to stop sending food and water to excavation sites. Again, Auguste Mariette did not let that discourage him, and he simply negotiated with other villagers. Several times, excavations had to be stopped, but the Egyptologists always find a way to continue working. When he announced that he had found the avenue of sphinxes, his enemies took things to the next level. After one failed to murder him by putting a snake in his bed, another one hired a killer to get rid of the explorer once and for all. The killers even waited for the right moment to shoot, but he missed his target and escaped on a horseback. Auguste managed to catch up with him and interrogated him. The killer did not know who ordered the hit, but told the archaeologist that his enemies would do anything to prevent him from discovering the sacred necropolis. Anyone else would have been scared off, but not Auguste Mariette. He decided that he would continue his excavations with a rifle by his side. despite yet another attempt to prevent him from finding the necropolis, which led authorities to shut down the excavation site. The Egyptologist found another way around the problem. He blew up the excavation house with dynamite and got more men to build it back up. He even struck a deal with them. Since he knew he was being watched during the day, he decided he would excavate at night. And this is how, one fateful night, he found the entrance to the necropolis. When the rest of the world learned about his discovery, August thought he would at last be left alone to work in peace. In his dreams, there were rumors that he had discovered spectacular treasures, but the archaeological treasures that he had found were in fact sarcophagi, pieces of mummified bulls, and thousands of stelae. However, the Bedouins from the area were quite convinced that the treasures were in gold and precious stones. One afternoon, Auguste and his friends Bonnefoy saw inspectors suddenly running away, and they immediately understood why. Bedouins. Both men locked themselves in the excavation house with their rifles. Outside, the Bedouins shouted out that they would not leave without the treasures. Auguste and Bonnefoy wasted no time and opened fire, telling the Bedouins that they were going to keep these treasures for the rest of their lives. Since both of them were sharp shooters and shouted very loud, the Bedouins thought that there were many men inside the house and ran away in fright. Auguste was then able to unearth the necropolis in peace, but to be safe, he started living on the site in a house that can be compared to the haunted houses you see today at fun fairs. According to one of his friends who stayed there, snakes slithered across the floor, spiders and scorpions crawled in and out of holes in the walls, and large spider webs hung from the ceiling like flags. As soon as night fell, bats attracted to the light would enter my room and terrorize me. Before I went to sleep, I would tuck the end of my mosquito net under the mattress and ask God and all his saints for protection, while jackals, hyenas, and wolves held outside the house. So as you have just seen, Auguste Mariette was an incredible Egyptologist, a fearless adventurer, and an eccentric too. When he moved to Cairo with his family, they needed space for his mini zoo. He had a cat, dog, chicken, boar, camel, gazelle, and several monkeys. There are lots of cool stories about them, such as the one about the monkey making friends with the boar. Both of them would often go on excursions looking for date palms. The monkey would then climb up a tree to pick dates, which it would eat, but never failed to send some down to its friends waiting below. In addition to the major discovery of the Serapeum at Saqqara, Auguste Mariette also went on to discover several tombs and carry out excavations at more than 30 sites around Egypt. He also created the first national museum in Cairo and wrote the story of Aida, a heroine who became famous in an opera that your parents probably know.